Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into something really fascinating. It's kind of at the intersection of psychology and education.
Right. We're looking at how our social world, our environment really shapes our creativity.
Exactly. You shared this really thought-provoking paper from 1995 by Beth Hennessy. And our mission basically is to unpack what fuels that creative spark and, well, how the outside world can sometimes boost it or, unfortunately, sometimes put it out.
Yeah. And the paper really digs into a core question.
Yeah.
How do we best foster creativity,
Mm-hmm.
especially, in schools, in learning environments?
Which has huge implications, obviously.
Absolutely. For education, for personal growth, everything.
Okay, so let's dive right in. One of the first things that struck me is how it challenges this really common idea.
Yeah.
The belief that things like grades, rewards, competition, that they're always good for getting results, especially creative results. It almost feels wrong, doesn't it?
It does feel a bit counterintuitive. We often just assume offer reward, get better performance.
Hmm.
But Hennessy takes this social psychological angle. Instead of just labeling people creative or not creative.
Which is kind of limiting anyway.
Right. The focus shifts to the situation. What environmental factors help or hinder creativity for, well, most people?
Hmm.
And I think that really speaks to, understanding those external things we can maybe influence, getting actionable insights.
Totally. It's less about some fixed talent and more about the conditions, right? Allowing talent to actually come out.
Precisely.
And this brings us to a really key idea in the paper, Teresa Amabiel's intrinsic motivation principle of creativity. Can you break that down?
Sure. So Amabiel's principle,
Mm-hmm.
in a nutshell, is that we're at our most creative when we're driven from within, by interest, enjoyment, satisfaction, the challenge itself, not by external pressures like grades or money or winning something.
So it's about the love of the game, not the prize.
Exactly, that internal fire.
Yeah.
And that's crucial for understanding the studies we're going to look at.
Okay, let's get into that evidence then. The paper talks about some really early studies with preschoolers and magic markers. Seems simple, but what did they find about rewards?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, maybe even surprising. These studies, like the one by Lepper, Green, and Nisbet back in '73, they found that kids who expected to get a reward for drawing actually showed less interest in playing with the markers later on,
Mm.
intrinsically less interested.
Less interest, just from expecting a reward.
Yes. And not only that, but judges rated their drawings as lower quality compared to kids who got a surprise reward or no reward at all and get the decreased interest. It stuck around for at least a week. It wasn't just a fleeting thing.
Wow, a whole week. That really makes you question just handing out rewards even for fun stuff like drawing. And you said other studies found similar things.
Yeah, there were follow-ups. Green and Lepper in '74, Knudel, Loveland, and Ollie in '79. They replicated these findings. Consistently, promising kids rewards for drawing seemed to lead to, well, less creative drawings and less inherent interest in the activity itself. It builds a pretty strong case.
Okay, so it's not just drawing. What about other tasks? The paper mentions Garbarino's study in '75 with older girls tutoring younger ones.
Ah, yes. That one's fascinating because it looks at the social side. Garbarino found the older girls who were promised a reward, I think it was a movie ticket, to tutor younger kids. Well, they were seen as more pushy, kind of businesslike, even a bit hostile and tense.
Really? Hostile.
Yeah, compared to the non-rewarded tutors. And maybe not surprisingly, the kids they tutored didn't learn as well. The tutors who weren't getting a reward, they came across as warmer, more relaxed, and their students did better. It shows how rewards can change our whole approach.
That's a really powerful point. The reward changed the relationship, not just the task focus. And didn't the research also look at the kinds of tasks people chose later on?
It did. Pittman, Emery, and Bogiano in '82, and Shapira back in '76. They looked at task choice, and what they found was pretty telling. People who hadn't been rewarded tended to pick more complex, challenging games or puzzles afterwards,
Okay.
whereas the ones who expected payment, they tended to go for the simpler, easier options.
So the reward might actually make us shy away from challenges.
It suggests that, yeah, like the reward shifts the goal from let's explore this to let's just get this done efficiently, less interest in stretching ourselves.
That has huge implications for learning, for innovation,
Hmm.
if we're avoiding the hard stuff. What about studies looking directly at, like, originality?
Yep, several. Kruglansky, Friedman, and Zevi in '71 looked at high schoolers doing open-ended tasks, the group that wasn't promised a reward. They showed significantly more originality, according to judges. Plus, they said they enjoyed it more and were more willing to do it again. The lack of pressure seemed to free them up.
Okay, so less pressure, more originality. And Amabiel's 82 study on artistic creativity with competition. How did that play out?
Right, this was the collage study with young girls. Some were told they were competing for prizes, others that prizes would be raffled randomly. The result, the girls who weren't directly competing in the raffle group made significantly more creative collages, as rated by artists later.
So competition itself, the pressure to win, squashed creativity.
It certainly seemed to. It reinforces this idea that external pressure, wanting to beat others for a prize, can really stifle that free-flowing artistic expression.
So across different ages, different tasks, rewards, competition, it seems like expecting these external things can really dampen that internal drive and creative output. But the paper goes deeper into why this happens, right? It talks about salient rewards. What does that mean?
Yeah, the idea is that for a reward to really hurt intrinsic motivation, it needs to be pretty noticeable, salient, and it has to feel like the reason you're doing the task. Like it becomes the main focus, what the paper calls a means to an extrinsic end.
So if the reward is shouting louder than the task itself.
Exactly. If you feel like I'm doing this for the reward, then that initial interest or enjoyment can get pushed aside, discounted.
That makes sense. It overshadows the internal stuff. And what about choice? Does having a choice in doing the task change how rewards affect us?
That's a really important detail. Folger, Rosenfield, and Hayes found in '78 that the negative impact of reward is less if people feel they have a choice about doing the activity in the first place.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, if you freely choose to do something and then you happen to get a reward, it doesn't seem to undermine your motivation as much as feeling like you have to do it to get the reward. Autonomy matters.
Having that sense of control buffers the negative effect. Good to know. And Amabiel, Hennessy, and Grossman look specifically at contracted for reward in '86. What's that about?
They focused on when you explicitly agree, I will do X in exchange for reward Y, contract essentially. And they found that this setup significantly undermined creativity in both kids doing verbal tasks and adults making collages.
So the feeling of being controlled by the reward is key.
It really seems to be. It's the perception that the reward is directing your performance rather than just being, a bonus.
Yeah.
That seems to be what's damaging.
And even just restricting choices within the task can hurt, like the Amabiel and Gittimer study with collage materials.
Yes, exactly. That '84 study showed nursery school kids who got to choose their collage materials made more creative pieces and showed more interest later compared to kids whose materials were picked for them.
Wow, even that small choice mattered.
It highlights how important even subtle forms of autonomy can be for fostering creativity and engagement.
Okay, so it's definitely not just about rewards. Other external factors are at play, like the expectation of evaluation. How does that stifle creativity?
Well, think about it. Knowing someone is going to judge your work, it creates pressure, maybe anxiety, and that can shift your focus away from just exploring and enjoying the process. Amabiel's '79 study found exactly that. Undergrad women expecting evaluation made less creative collages and reported less interest compared to a group not expecting evaluation. The thought of being judged seemed to shut down the creative flow.
And this wasn't a one-off finding, right?
No, not at all. Other studies confirmed it for both artistic creativity and verbal creativity in adults. Consistently, people expecting their work to be judged produced less creative stuff, whether it was art or writing. It's a robust effect.
It's funny, the paper even mentions a study where positive feedback beforehand had a negative effect later on children's creativity. That seems weird.
It does sound counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Right.
Berkles, Amabiel, and Handel, '81.
Oh.
But it might suggest that even praise, if it sets up an expectation like I have to live up to this, can become a form of pressure. It might make kids less willing to take risks next time, fearing they won't meet that standard again.
Huh. Pressure to repeat success? I hadn't thought of it that way. And it's not just evaluation, the way limits are set matters too. Like that Kostner et al. Study on neatness.
Right. That '84 study looked at telling kids to be neat while painting. Using controlling language, you should, you must, reduced intrinsic motivation and creativity compared to just giving informational limits. Here's how we keep things tidy. Or no limits.
So the tone matters, informational versus controlling.
Exactly. How the constraint is framed seems crucial for preserving that internal drive.
It's really striking how consistent this all is. Rewards, evaluation, controlling limits. They all seem to chip away at intrinsic motivation and creativity, which brings us to the classroom, because as the paper points out, schools use these things all the time.
That's the big paradox, isn't it? We have this body of research, but reward and evaluation are staples of education. And it's not like educators don't want to foster creativity. Most would say it's a key goal.
So where's the disconnect? Why the gap between the research and the practice?
The paper suggests it might stem from a fundamental misunderstanding of intrinsic motivation. You can't really force it from the outside. It has to come from within that genuine interest, that passion. And that internal drive is actually quite delicate. It's easily undermined by these external pressures.
Okay, so we see that these things are often detrimental. But why? What are the theories behind this undermining effect?
Well, one early idea was the competing response hypothesis. The thought was maybe just thinking about the reward distracts you, pulls your focus from enjoying the task itself.
Makes sense. You're thinking about the prize, not the process.
Right. But Amabile and colleagues tested this. They gave rewards before the task sometimes. And even then, creativity was lower. So that made the simple distraction idea seem less likely to be the whole story.
Okay, so it's not just distraction. What about the overjustification effect? That sounds important.
It's a big concept in social psychology linked to Kelly's discounting principle. The basic idea is if you have both a good internal reason, I like doing this, and a good external reason, I'm getting paid for this, to do something, you tend to overemphasize the external reason and discount the internal one. You start thinking, oh, I must be doing this mainly for the reward, even if you initially enjoyed it.
Right. The external reward justifies the action, so you downplay your internal interest.
Exactly.
That works well for adults, maybe older kids. But the paper points out younger children, like under 7 or 8, don't really seem to have the cognitive chops for that kind of discounting logic.
That's the real puzzle with young kids, isn't it? If they aren't consciously discounting, why do rewards still seem to undermine their interest? Researchers have looked at a few possibilities. Maybe our standard experiments are just too abstract for them.
Like the way we ask questions doesn't fit how they think.
Possibly. Some studies tried simplifying things and found hints of discounting-like reasoning in preschoolers. But it's not consistent, especially in the really young ones.
The paper also mentions young kids might focus more on the object than the person-entity explanations. How does that fit in?
Yeah, Newman and Rubel found young kids often explain actions by pointing to the thing being used, not the person's internal state. When researchers adapted tests to fit this, they saw some 6-year-olds could reason in ways related to discounting, suggesting context really matters.
But even then, the paper stresses that young kids often don't seem to get the ulterior motives behind rewards, right?
Exactly. They might not grasp that rewards are often used to get people to do things they wouldn't otherwise want to do. They might just see a sticker, whatever, and think, oh, cool, this must be fun. They interpret the reward as a positive sign about the activity itself.
So they're not thinking, they must be bribing me because this is boring.
Probably not. Not in the same way an adult might. That lack of understanding makes the standard over-justification discounting explanation tricky for the youngest kids.
And that Hennessy and Berger study in '93, where kids decided who gets a reward, the worker or the player.
Right. That showed that while young kids could tell the difference between work, not so fun, and play, fun, they didn't automatically give the reward to the worker. They were just as likely to reward the player.
Meaning they hadn't yet learned that rewards usually go with less desirable tasks.
Exactly. It suggests they lack that key understanding underpinning the discounting logic.
So if discounting isn't the full picture for young kids, what's the alternative? The paper talks about an effective explanation.
This takes a more developmental approach. It suggests maybe it's less about conscious reasoning and more about feelings. The idea is that kids start associating activities controlled by external things, like rewards, with the concept of work, which might carry neutral or even slightly negative feelings.
Whereas activities without those constraints feel like play.
Right. Play feels intrinsically good, self-directed, fun. So rewards might subtly shift an activity into the work category in a child's mind, and a less positive feeling associated with work is what actually reduces their interest.
That reminds me of Piaget's concern about pushing kids developmentally. Maybe we're missing how they actually perceive things.
Exactly. The paper suggests maybe the push to prove young kids can discount has overshadowed the simpler possibility that they just feel differently about rewarded activities. Those learned associations between external control and the feeling of work could be key.
And kids develop these work-play concepts pretty early, don't they?
They do. Research shows even 3-year-olds start making the distinction. By kindergarten, they often define play by choice, self-direction, uninterrupted time, and work is often just seen as anything you have to do. This early understanding supports the idea that the feeling tied to work versus play could be central.
Okay, this work-play feeling distinction seems really important, and the immunization studies offer some support for this. Tell us about those.
Yeah, these were clever. Hennessy, Amabile, and Martinosh in '89 tried to see if they could immunize kids against the negative effects of reward. They ran training sessions focusing on the fun, interesting, playful aspects of tasks before introducing rewards.
Like reminding them why it's enjoyable in the first place.
Exactly, to make the intrinsic motivation more salient, more resilient.
And the initial results were unexpected.
They were. In the first study, reward actually seemed to boost creativity in the trained group.
Boost it? How?
Well, it hinted that maybe intrinsic and extrinsic motivation aren't always enemies. Maybe if you strongly feel the intrinsic interest, the reward acts as an enhancer, not a controller. Deci and Ryan's work fits here. It depends how you interpret the constraint. The training might have shifted that interpretation.
But follow-up studies clarified this.
Yes. While they didn't always see a boost, the later studies consistently showed the training helped kids maintain their normal creativity levels when rewarded.
So it prevented the usual drop.
Precisely. It confirmed the immunization effect. The training buffered them against the typical negative impact of expecting a reward.
And what's the thinking behind why the training worked?
The idea is it likely fostered attitudes that de-emphasized the reward and emphasized playfulness, challenge, and risk-taking. By focusing on the fun and inherent interest, it helped kids keep framing the activity as play, even with a reward hanging there. They maintained that intrinsically motivated mindset.
It's really interesting to connect this lab stuff to the real world. The paper mentions creative professionals, scientists, artists who seem naturally good at this.
Absolutely. Think about highly creative people you know or have read about.
Yeah.
Often they're deeply passionate, driven by curiosity, the love of the process. They seem able to tune out or reframe external pressures like deadlines or evaluations or even potential fame and fortune to stay focused on the intrinsic joy of the work itself, like they've self-immunized.
They keep it feeling like play, even when it's technically work.
Essentially, yes. They protect that intrinsic core.
So after this whole deep dive, what are the big takeaways? What should listeners really hold on to?
I think the core message is crystal clear. That intrinsic motivation, that inner drive, is absolutely vital for creativity. And it's surprisingly fragile. Things like expected rewards, competition, evaluation, they can easily undermine it. While the exact why is complex, especially for kids, the perception of an activity, is it work being controlled or play driven by interest, seems incredibly important.
And for our listeners thinking practically.
Well, just be mindful, in your own life, at work, with kids. Notice how rewards and evaluations are being used. Think about whether they might be inadvertently dampening creativity, and look for ways to actively nurture intrinsic interest.
How can you make things feel more like play, more about the challenge and enjoyment itself?
Exactly. Focus on the process, the discovery, the inherent satisfaction, maybe more than just the outcome or the external validation.
This has been fascinating. It really makes you think differently about motivation. And it leaves us with a final thought. If even short training sessions can help immunize against these negative effects, what could we achieve if we more consciously designed our schools, our workplaces, even our personal projects to truly prioritize and protect that intrinsic motivation, that joy in the process itself? Something to definitely ponder.
A powerful question indeed.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.